And welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Live. On today's show, we're going to talk about something that is kind of blowing up in the news right now due to James Fox just came out with a documentary on this. It's the Virginia, I just call it Virginia. It's Varginha
Varginha,
Brazil UFO crash. I can't hardly say that. So, this is a very strange case that happened in 1996 down in Brazil. Believe it or not, it sounds kind of crazy, but Dr. Roger Lear looked into this. So did Stanton Friedman and obviously James Fox, the filmmaker. So this is going to be very interesting, very unusual, because it's not every day that you hear about this many people looking into a UFO case that's not in America. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I saw a brief video on YouTube about it last week, and I figured this would be a good topic to do the show on because it has been looked at so extensively, and the story is truly out of this world and mind bending.
Oh yeah, for sure. And right now we're on a UFO kick the last couple of weeks anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, one thing I do want to talk about though real quick. We're going to talk about a little bit of team news before we get started with the topic for today. Out of 120 of our old radio shows from 2014, I'm up to about number 80 right now. So I got 80 of them done in about 2 weeks, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get them all done by the 17th. That's kind of the cutoff period. So I'm thinking probably by the end of this week, I'll have all 120 of the old ones uploaded.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
And then, well, I guess there's two other bits of team news I wanted to mention. So me and you, actually you and me, however you want to word it, we're going to get started on a UFO crash case from 1996, ironically, but it's not this one. It's a different one. Do you want to talk a little bit about that real quick, Nick?
Are you talking about the Arizona
Yeah, that one.
UFO crash? Yeah, there was a crash out in Arizona. What was the name of the place again? I have it on Google Earth.
Pinedale, Arizona.
Pinedale, Arizona. And a UFO had crashed in the mountains there and had started a big fire. And I found a potential location for this crash on Google Earth near this town. And out in the foothills, there's this big area where there's a crater, and you can see the trees kind of bent in towards this crater.
Oh yeah.
Where there was a fire zone. It's crazy. That's just what I could find from Google Earth. So I'm looking forward to looking at that case.
Oh yeah, and then the other thing I was going to say real quick is the last couple days I've been contacting the original researchers of the Garrison, Utah UFO crash case. I got some. Literally, I think I am the only. I guess I call myself a journalist or a reporter, whatever you want to call it. The only person to actually track both of these guys down outside of their little UFO group within the last 20 years and write an article on this. So as far as I know, the information that I'm going to write about this within the next week or so is going to be something that's nowhere else on the internet. I talked to each one of them for about 2 hours, so I got some good stuff. Well, other than that, we'll get back to that a little bit later. Nick, did you want to start off with a little bit of news articles, some news videos real quick?
Yeah. So let me share my screen.
There we go.
Okay, so this first video I found is a video of a few ghost hunters at a ghost town in Missouri, and I like this video because it really drives home the point of the necessity of doing a walkthrough before you actually conduct your ghost hunt. You have to go through and make sure the environment's clear of any potential hazards, and that includes other people. So I'm just going to let the video go and it'll explain itself.
It felt like predators surrounding prey. We had to make a couple detours, And I think that this is the town that we're looking for, but we are not alone out here. We've already had 2 encounters with people living out in these woods.
I don't even want to move another step right now until I know where those guys are.
Oh, and of course, an ad would start.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to play Roblox or Minecraft or whatever this is. I mean, this looks pretty intense. I wouldn't mind even trying to.
100 yards,
Where are they at? Missouri somewhere?
Yeah, the ghost town.
What's he doing out there?
And here's like
Real-
a vagrant just wandering through the woods.
The most was the fact that seemed like he could see us perfectly in pitch black dark.
What is that? Just some guy lurking around out there?
Yeah, that's some guy. He looks like he's carrying a hammer, some hillbilly
Jeez,
squatting in
yeah.
the ghost town.
Jesus.
Oh, here's the really scary ones coming up.
Appeared to be a light pole in the distance, and also some dirt roads coming up ahead of us. However, we weren't anywhere close to safety yet.
I mean, I can almost feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Well, look at.
Coming up though. Mine's dying too.
What's there, like someone out there? Or? Oh, D.
Wait.
So this is before they even did their ghost hunt. They're running into all this stuff.
Yeah, that's even before their ghost hunt. They're running into like hillbillies that are living here and squatting in the ghost town. It's pretty crazy. But that drives home the point you need to check out your location before you actually do your ghost hunt.
Well, we were out
Here.
and we found a meth lab one time when we were out.
Yeah. Here's a video from Mexico where a pilot was about to take off, and you could see there over the horizon a disc.
You circle it with your mouse, Nick, so people know where you're looking.
The other one just came back up. Make this shit up, Vince.
So they're getting ready to take off. There's like something on the like up above the runway. Oh yeah, there you go.
A UFO that was captured by a pilot before takeoff.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nuts. Look at that. It's like blinking and moving in ways you wouldn't see an aircraft normally do.
Oh yeah. Well, I have 2 quick news articles I'm going to show, and then we'll get started with today's topic. I am going to share my screen real quick. Like I said, I got 2 things, then we'll get started with the topic for today. It looks like the first one I'm going to share. I guess there was some lights over Las Vegas, Nevada. This was what, in the last week, Nick?
Yeah, a week or two ago, I remember.
Just like a 30-second video of the lights in the news.
Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a UFO? We can't figure it out. So a viewer reaching out saw these large bright lights in the skies over the strip in downtown. He says they're bigger than the helicopters we see circling many, many times. And we just heard back from Nellis. They say not involved in this. So if you think you know what these are, or you've seen these, you can reach out, let us know right on our website, anewsnow.com. Top story there.
So that was one. And then I'll do the other one real quick. Let me
It's
share my
crazy
screen on
those
this one.
lights over the sky. I mean,
Yeah,
we've seen plenty of weird lights over the skies of Vegas through the years, so it doesn't surprise me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. My last one's a short article. I'll read this off real quick and then we'll get started. It says Pentagon scrambles 3 F-22 jets to intercept a UFO over Hawaii. An object spotted over the remote Pacific state prompted the U.S. Air Force to send out 3 fighter jets last week. Earlier this year, there was a spat of sightings involving strange spherical balloon-like objects being sighted, not only over the U.S., but over Canada and beyond. U.S. fighter jets were sent to intercept the objects, reportedly shot several of them down, including one described as a cylindrical and silverish gray. It was traveling at 40,000 feet over Alaska. Let me go down a little bit to where they actually talk about it. Pacific Air Force has launched 3 F-22s to assess the situation and visually identified a spherical object. We monitored the transit of the object and assessed that it posed no threat. As part of our normal daily operation, we closely track all vessels and aircraft in the Indo-Pacific area and through a combination of joint capabilities to protect the U.S. homeland, support our allies and partners, and select a free and open Indo-Pacific. A DoD spokesman also said the Department of Defense and the Federal Aviation, the FAA, detected and observed on April 28th an unmanned balloon off the coast of Hawaii. Again, I was like, oh, here we go again. More of the balloons. Balloon mania. So, I don't know. What do you think of that, Nick? Do we really need 3 F-22s to take down one balloon?
No, that's kind of crazy. I mean, there was a comedian I like, and he was talking about the balloon craziness, and he's like, okay, China must be laughing at us if they're flying balloons over the country and we're sending our fighter jets. He's like, it's a balloon you can buy at Hobby Lobby. Really,
Yeah.
We have bigger things in the world to worry about than balloons. But I mean, maybe they do have some high-tech capabilities to spy on us and that kind of thing. However, again, these balloons, they let them come across the ocean. The first one that was spotted came down from Canada, Alaska,
Oh, yeah.
Wyoming, Montana. It flew across the country even before it was a blip on someone's radar. So
Oh, yeah.
how big of a threat is it really?
Yeah. Well, we did a radio show. I call it a radio show. We did a show on here where we talked about the spy balloons and the Project Blue Beam connection. Me and Tim talked about. That's pretty interesting. Without further ado, we're gonna get started with tonight's topic. A good intro for this would be to talk a little bit about the general situation, I guess. So in 1996, during the summertime, I believe it was June or July, reports started coming in that there was strange creatures with leaving three-toed footprints appearing in and around the town of Varginha, H-A. I guess that's how you would say it.
Yeah, Varginha, yeah.
Yeah. They're around Varginha. Sorry, I was in the chat room. Yeah, so people were seeing strange creatures on the ground shortly after there was some kind of a lightning storm or a bad storm of some kind. And basically the military was involved, almost like Roswell. They were picking up these creatures. They were trying to put out the press and trying to cover up this whole story. And one man reportedly even died from touching one of these aliens.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit later. So I guess the best way to start talking about this, I'll start here. So the very first reports that started coming in came from local farmers right outside of Varginha, Brazil. And they said that it was in the middle of the night, probably about 10 o'clock at night, they were saying, and their cows started going crazy. Like they started running around their pens, almost as if they sensed that something strange was going on or something bad was going to happen. And the couple went outside to go see what was going on as far as the cows were, like see what the cows were doing. And they said that they saw a metallic object about the size of a minibus flying very slow, and it was smoking. They said that you could see that there was some kind of damage to the craft. Like there was they called it like a rip in the side, or like it had hit something. It was making no noise, and it was cigar shaped. And that's, as far as I know, that's the very first time that the objects made an appearance. Before we get going, Nick, here's my question. They said that there was a tear in the side of this thing, or that it was ripped open. How the hell did it do that? Lightning strike, maybe?
I mean, it could be there's a variety of things that could happen. I mean, there could have been a lightning strike. It could have collided with something prior to entering the atmosphere. There could have been some kind of an explosion on board due to craft technical difficulties. So there are different possibilities as to why the craft had a hole in it, but it would have been something pretty gnarly, so to say.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy event.
They said it was flying slow, and they were reporting that it was kind of wobbling around like this a little bit, like it was struggling to stay in the air.
Well, I remember reading about that account. And the gentleman that saw the craft coming down and wobbling, he specifically noted that the smoke coming from the craft was white and not black or gray. So it almost would look like it would be steam by the way the gentleman described it. So
you're talking about Carlos de Souza. That's the witness, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So Carlos de Souza, he was watching the object the same time that these farmers were watching it. Like Nick was saying, he said that there was a tear in the side, and it was almost like it was, like he said, didn't look like there was a fire as much as there was some kind of smoke coming out. And I guess he was in his own car and he was following the object from a distance. He was saying during interviews that he thought it was some kind of airplane that was crashing, and that people inside were going to be in trouble and they were going to need his help. So I guess he was following along or tracking this. But then again, though, if he said it was a metallic object and he saw it was a metallic object, why the hell would you think it was an airplane? That was my question. But anyways, so he says he roughly saw it was about 1,000 feet up, and it gained and lost altitude a number of times, and it was wobbling like I just did the hand movement. And he drove to where he eventually saw this object crash. I guess this was near it was in a farming area, not on the farmland of the two farms that I just had mentioned, but in that general area. He drove to where it crashed, and he said he saw a 100-foot area that was burned by some kind of acid or chemical substance that was spewing out of the craft. So we're going to stop there real quick, Nick. What do you think this could have been, this acid that was coming out of it? What could this have been? Do you have any idea? Maybe some kind of nuclear power, something to deal with that, or hydraulic fluid of some kind? Or
it could be fuel. It could have been, some kind of hydraulic fluid, or it could be some kind of substance that we don't know about yet, because we're talking about interstellar travel. So the mechanics of a UFO aren't something that is not widely known, at least to the civilian population. The guys at Area 51 might have some idea how these things work, but most likely I think would be a kind of fuel source, or maybe a cooling solution to keep the craft cool while it traveled at such high velocities.
The thing that I thought was kind of odd about the whole thing, though, they were saying that some scientists, such as Bob Lazar, whether you believe him or not, Bob Lazar was saying that he was told, and I guess he allegedly worked on these things, and he was saying that they were powered by nuclear reactors. If this thing crashed and had a nuclear reactor on board, like Bob said, wouldn't this be like a gigantic explosion, you would think?
Yeah.
But Carlos never said there wasn't either, though, I guess.
If they had a nuclear reactor on it and some kind of nuclear waste fell onto the surface of the earth below, it would cause damage that I, according to what I've read about Chernobyl, it sounds very similar to the destruction that happened at Chernobyl, just on a much smaller scale. When that liquid came out of the UFO and went onto the ground, it started burning and killing things like a nuclear spill would.
Well, we did have I have two cases where this sort of thing did happen in the past. Number one, in 1952, an object crashed in a copper mine near Ely, Nevada. And we personally worked on this case. Nick, did you want to talk a little bit about that substance that was dripping off the UFO? Or you want to give a quick rundown of what happened, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion about that, and then we'll get back to Varginha?
So as a side note, we have worked on the Ely UFO, the two Ely UFO crashes that occurred within about a decade of each other. And in the first one, a craft came down into the mine that is near present-day Ruth, Nevada, and when it crashed, it emitted some kind of ooze or foamy liquid, and it hardened. And some people out there, some sources we have showed us on this hardened material that was pretty weird, and I've never seen anything like it myself. So this does sound very, very much the same as the Varginha case.
Something I thought was a little odd about that. They were saying that Carlos de Souza was saying that when this object hit, I guess he had got there right after it hit, they had some kind of acid that had melted or was burning all the plants and things. In the Ely case, like in the 1953, I call it 1953. In the 1953 Ely case, the miners that were crowding around this UFO after it had crashed in this copper mine, they were saying that this molten ooze foam material, it was melting the snow around the object, and it was melting the rocks and things on and around the object where this stuff was dripping. So I was like, could it have been the same material? I kind of wonder. To tell you the truth, maybe the difference is the one in Ely didn't explode or whatever like this one did.
Well, the fact that the material that came from the Ely craft melted rocks is crazy. How can a substance actually like melt a hard rock? That's going to be some very potent material. One of the samples that one of our sources out there in Ely or Ruth rather showed us, wasn't it like the foamy stuff fused with some rocks, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, there was one. It had like a honeycomb texture, like it was felt almost hollow, and it was looked like, we call it like a scrambled egg rock is what we were calling it. Then there was another type of rock. It was roughly what the size of maybe $50, but it was incredibly heavy, and it was magnetic. Is that the one you were referring to, or the other one?
I think it was the honeycomb one. It looked like it was like different kinds of minerals fused, but not like minerals you would see going out, into nature and go rock hounding or something. It was, it was like a honeycomb, and pull up the picture. It's better to show than tell. This is a visual aid for what may have been seen.
You're talking about this one?
Yeah,
this
that
is
one
the
right
one
there.
that's hollow. And then we have, there's an edge of it. You can see where it's melted at one point. And that's car keys next to it. Then we have, there's the other two samples of rock next to that one. That's a magnet stuck on the smaller rock.
Yeah, no, the tan sample is definitely the one that blows my mind the most. But
yeah, we tried to get that one, but our source wouldn't let us keep that one.
Yeah.
Well, another quick note. So we had the Ely incident where it was dripping some kind of a molten ooze or an acid or whatever you want to call it. There's another historical case from 1898 in Nebraska. There was a UFO that supposedly crashed out there into some tall grass near a farm field. And there were some ranchers that came across it. And they were saying when they got out to this crash site, there was like a wet substance all over this tall grass. Like when it had hit, it blew open like almost like a water balloon or something, and some kind of acid or liquid sprayed out all over. I wrote a blog report on it. We could do a show just on that, so I don't want to get into too many details. But so I'm guessing this is not the first time that this has happened, or at least from what we know, there's at least 2 other instances of something similar. Continuing on, so Carlos follows this object. It crashes. He shows up on the site. He sees this area covered in acid, and he starts seeing what he calls alien bodies. The alien bodies that he sees are not what you would picture with your common alien. These creatures, he was saying that they had red eyes. They had like a smooth skin or like a sticky skin-like texture. It had almost what you would call horns or protrusions coming out of their heads. And they had basically no nose, a little slit for a mouth. And according to him, some of these creatures had died on this site, or some of these creatures, I'm trying to think of how to try. These creatures were laying all around this site. And this is where it gets kind of crazy. I don't know if I believe this or not. It's kind of iffy. So Carlos says when he pulls up to the site and sees all this, he picks up a piece of the metal that's laying on the ground from the craft, and he almost describes it like the Roswell metal, the memory metal. He said he basically crumpled up some of this metal. It had uncrumpled in his hand back to its original shape. In the middle of him doing all this, there's two different versions of his story. One version, he says the military arrives and they basically come out with guns and they force him to leave. The other version, he says he pulled up to the site and the military was already there. So I don't know if you want to discount his story because of that, or if that just means if that doesn't really matter because it's one simple little one part of the like it's not very extravagant to the story. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think that the detail isn't really that important. I mean, sometimes, a popular expression is I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast. I hear people say that. So,
oh yeah.
So, did the military get there after he did or before he did? The human mind is very fallible. So his mind probably just juxtaposed the sequence of events. However, the main point is the military was there at some point, and because the military was there, something significant had occurred, in fact.
Oh yeah, for sure. The other thing I was going to ask you is, what do you think of that? So I was trying to wrap my head around this. So whether you think this is true or not. So this man sees this object ready to crash. It's shaking and wobbling like this. He drives out to the site, sees alien bodies, looks at the bodies, sees this acid all over the place, picks up the memory metal, crumples it up, watches it uncrumple. He does all of this before the military gets there, or the military is already there when he's doing this. I don't know. Sometimes, depending on certain aspects of the story, make it kind of hard to believe. In other parts, if the military wasn't there, I guess it could have happened. But the military was already there. No way in hell would they let him do all this.
Yeah, no, they would have secured the scene and would not have let him go touch the alien bodies. But he did say that when he touched the bodies, their skin almost felt like silicone, if I recall correctly. So that's a really finite detail. It's a very detailed point to remember what the skin felt like. So I'm inclined to think the military had not quite been there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe also, like I said, his mind juxtaposed things because around the time of this incident, there was a heavy military presence already in the area, if I recall correctly. Right before the crash occurred, there was a lot of military vehicles and training going on around here. So the military was on this guy's mind. So again, the human mind can play tricks on itself, and
well, I know
the story aren't really that big of a deal.
Something I thought was kind of interesting. He says that the object was the size of a school bus, and if you don't remember correctly, the farmers were saying that they thought it was the size of a minibus. So they kind of agree on that.
Yeah.
Carlos did say he smelled a very strong ammonia smell at the site. Like there was, I don't know if it was that acid or if it was the creatures themselves that had that weird smell or what that was. But one way or another, I guess Carlos got so scared about this. They said he didn't talk to the media for 26 years until James Fox started doing this documentary that just came out recently, and he started talking to. I guess he tracked him down somehow.
Yeah, no, I remember I was watching a video earlier of James Fox and Joe Rogan, and he was telling Rogan that this guy was really scared, and even on the day of the interview, he didn't really want to talk. So this guy saw something that just absolutely freaked him out. And to allude back to Ely again, when we talked to several witnesses, we had people that were very reluctant to come forward, but after poking and prodding them for a while, they finally decided to give what information they could.
Oh yeah, we what was crazy with our stuff is you got to figure we're walking into this small town, about what, 3,500 people. They right off the bat, they hate Las Vegas right off the bat.
Yeah.
And that's strike one against us. We show up, then we start talking of stirring up a bunch of crap around town that people haven't really discussed in years about UFOs and aliens. And then I guess big time news media tried to come in the area over the years. So these people they're already suspicious of you.
Yeah.
It took us what? It took us like 3 or 4 trips of wasting our time before someone started talking to us.
Yeah, it took a while and a lot of legwork to be able to get ins into the community. It wasn't until we befriended a local DJ and a director of the county museum at the time that, that was when people decided we were trustworthy.
Oh, yeah.
Befriended these two guys. So
I can't imagine what James Fox went through. He's an American walking around Brazil trying to talk to these people.
Yeah, no, and I think in the interview on Rogan, he said that they were like going door to door to strangers' houses and asking for one of the witnesses.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say I wouldn't want to be killed. I don't know if I would be doing that as an American in Brazil.
Oh, yeah, I definitely don't have the balls to do that.
So continuing on. So Carlos de Souza sees this UFO crash. This is kind of where it gets kind of confusing. So 7 days, a full week after Carlos de Souza's encounter, a group of 4 or 5 witnesses were traveling. It's a bunch of guys. They were leaving a gym. And they saw several military trucks driving through one of the neighborhoods in Virginia, near a wooded area. I guess there's like a wooded area between the gym and this neighborhood. And they saw the military trucks were driving around. And these guys, now this is another thing. I don't think I'd have the balls to do this. These guys follow these military trucks around town trying to see what they're doing. I was like, I don't think I would be able to do that. I don't have the balls to do that. They follow these military trucks, and eventually they come across a blockade area. And they get to where the blockade is, and there's 4 or 5 soldiers on foot that approach them with their guns drawn and ordered them to leave the area. And this was 7 days, like I said, after Carlos de Souza reported his encounter. So were these creatures wandering around the area for a week? It's like, you know what I mean? Were they wandering around for a week, or were Carlos's dates just messed up? Or what do you think, Nick? Have you read about this yet?
It's possible that the creatures could have been wandering around for a while because a lot of these places in Brazil are remote and kind of off to the side, so to say. So maybe these creatures had gone off into the jungle or forest and were hiding out for a bit. And, it could be easy to assume that they could have gone undetected, hiding in the wilderness of Brazil.
Well, it makes me wonder too. So I know that there's about at least testimony of 3 of the creatures being caught, and 1 was dead. So there's 4 creatures, 3 or 4 creatures roughly. Were there other ones that were dead at the scene that Carlos talked about, plus these ones? So was there a total of like 10 aliens maybe? And we only saw like 3 or 4 of them were alive at the time and ran away? Or wonder what the story is about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible. We really don't know the exact number of creatures that were on the craft, but we do know that there are 4 that were captured. Now, as a side note, to backtrack for a second to talk about the liquid coming out of the craft, I did pull up an article, and it said ammonia can be used as a fuel source. So perhaps, and it also said in the article that ammonia is corrosive, that it burns away and stuff. It's like an acid.
Yeah.
So it was probably just liquid ammonia that spouted from the side of the craft and caused the damage, and then that smell. But I just thought
I agree. Oh, yeah. My other thing I was thinking, so we have this blockade set up. More than one person actually saw the blockade. There are a couple different witnesses that saw this. And are the most exciting witnesses are 3 girls that happen to come across on a walking path. But we'll get into that in just a moment. But this is the same day as that happened. There's another guy. There's a news reporter. It's called TV Princesa or Princesa. So it's like one of their TV stations. His name was Nyei Nadaya, Nadeia. He was a reporter for TV Princessa back then, and he says the night of the crash, a huge storm blew in right as the sun was going down. And he was saying that there was like wind and rain and lightning. And he says when the night fell, he got word that there's 3 local girls that saw a strange creature running around town. And he went to the area where this creature was supposedly sighted, and he said he saw the blockade. He was told that the area was being blocked off for national security reasons when he asked what was going on to the guys that were at the blockade. 2 reporters for that, I guess they're like his sidekicks or his other fellow reporters for the same TV station, went to ESA military base. ESA is how it's spelled, ESA military base. And I guess they went to the gates, which were locked. Normally they're open, I guess, but they were locked and shut. And they were asking what was going on to the guards that were out front. Apparently the guards went behind the gate and a sergeant came back walking outside these closed gates. And he said, if you ask about this UFO or creatures one more time, you're going to be arrested, is what he was told. So that kind of speaks volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the military was shutting down the press. They didn't want the press to talk about it. There's this blockade was set up. We'll get into just a minute about the girls and what they had seen. So one thing I did want to mention. So they were saying that this object came down in the middle of some kind of like a bad storm. I don't know if you're familiar, Nick, with the weather conditions of Roswell the night that the UFO supposedly went down in July of 1947.
Yeah.
They were saying that there was a huge lightning storm the night that that object went down, or those objects, whatever you want to believe. And they were saying that some theorists think that it was struck by lightning or that the 2 objects might have hit each other, and that's what happened. But one more thing I'd like to do. I want to share my screen for this one. This is getting a little bit off topic here, but I gotta share this. So what was I looking at? Ely, we are looking at, no, not that one. No, not that one either. Oh, here we go. So part of the Ely, Nevada UFO crash, this is from January 17th, 1953. If you go down to the bottom, this is the actual newspaper article that we believe talks about the object coming down. It says lightning was going on. So there's a big snowstorm and a lightning storm. It said lights in Ely went out of commission Tuesday evening for a period of nearly half an hour due to what's believed to have been lightning that accompanied the rainstorm, which was followed by a short, intense blizzard. So basically what's going on is, for some reason, I don't know why, but these objects seem to be coming down in lightning storms, rainstorms. I don't know if that's just they can't handle the storms here, or just by freak accident they happen to crash.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It is a freak accident to me, but
yeah, so here's one thing I was also going to mention. So the SA Air Force Base or military base over in Brazil, they were saying that they were trying to shut down the press. They're trying to say that this object didn't actually crash. There was no creatures being reported. It kind of reminds me of Roswell, where the newspapers in the area were reporting that the United States, the Air Force was in charge, or they were in contact with a flying disc. They captured it. And then the next day, the same newspapers came out saying that it was a false alarm, that these objects, the disc was actually a weather balloon. So almost like I guess you would call it a cover-up, right?
well, yeah, and there's a good reason as to why the cover-up at Varginha occurred. If you read some of the reports about the incident, it is said that English-speaking people, white people, showed up in suits and kind of took over the situation. And a lot of people assumed that this was these people were officials from the U.S. government, and they wanted to rein in control of this situation as fast as they could. So the U.S. government would use the same tactics in Brazil as they did in Roswell and other places where cover-ups have occurred.
So do you think that the United States was working with the Brazilian officials, or do you think that they kind of just showed up and were doing their own thing, kind of forcing their way into the situation?
I'm thinking they probably were working with them. I mean, there's a lot of cooperation between governments of the world. We live in a globalist world order where everything's very interconnected. Even back then in 96, we were very interconnected as a world. So I think they were working with them, but I believe the United States thought that they could handle the situation a lot better than the Brazilian authorities. And for good reason. Like I said, they've done UFO cover-ups in other places in this country, the United States. So they have a lot of experience with covering and pumping out propaganda about weather balloons.
One of the coolest things I ever heard was there was a UFO crash over in Garrison, Utah, and I guess the investigators were claiming that they actually had documentation of individuals that were at this crash site. God, I was like, can you imagine that? Couldn't imagine having that kind of information, especially with a situation like this. That's exactly what you would need as a researcher.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's documentation about the Brazil incident that we're talking about right now, but it would be very dangerous to possess those documents or copies of those documents, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I know they exist, though, because Linda Moulton Howe, she did some speeches in 2005 and 2006 with these two gentlemen, Steve Jones and David Rosenfeld. She actually did speeches where she showed some of these pictures. I know this is getting kind of off on a tangent or off topic, but I was like, holy crap, that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're linking up various UFO cases from different time periods and showing the similarities. And there are a lot of similarities between this case and the other ones we've been talking about here on the show tonight.
Oh, yeah. So continuing on, I had mentioned that these news reporters were trying to come into this specific area because there was 3 young girls that said that they saw a creature while they were on a walking path. Nick, do you want to tell the story about the 3 girls, and then I'll just throw in my 2 cents later on when you're done with that, telling your side?
Yeah, I could tell this story. Actually, I found a clip of the girls, all 3 of them, giving their accounts to, I believe, Nat Geo about 10, 15 years ago in a special they did.
Yeah, that's right. If you have the video, you can play it.
Yeah, I can play
unless
that.
Unless it's like an hour-long video or something.
No, it's like 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, we can play it.
I think the video does more justice than any way I could tell it.
Yeah. Looks like they don't want you to look at it either.
Wow. I am offline. That is
You're offline, but somehow you're talking to me.
Okay, oh, there it goes.
They wanted to get the ad sure to work.
The CIA's hacking our feed right now because we're talking about this stuff.
Yeah. And make it full screen and turn it up, Nick.
3 primary witnesses who reportedly saw the live alien.
That's James Fox right there.
Hello. It's your James. I'd like to start off by saying this is like, the holy grail of witnesses for me. So I am so happy to be here right now. Can you describe to us what happened in January of 1996?
Você pode descrever pra gente o que aconteceu em janeiro de 96?
A gente estava voltando do serviço que ela trabalhava.
So it was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was not the usual way that they would take to go back home.
E olhei, falei assim, só pra elas assim, gente, olha ali.
She saw a little picture that was like sweating. There was like a little person with no hair whatsoever, red eyes, and 3 horns. She pointed to the other girls and started running the other way.
If they all had the opportunity to speak to the world about their experience, what would they like the world to know?
Ah, pra mim não foi boa, não. Se fosse pra me passar por isso hoje, eu não passaria.
They said it wasn't a good experience at all. If they could choose, they wouldn't go through it again. Only people who have been through what they have been through can tell how they felt and how it all affected their lives.
How has it changed their lives?
Como isso afetou a vida de vocês?
Em tudo. No trabalho, na escola.
She said it affected everything.
So they were walking down a footpath
Yeah.
on their way home, and they came across some alien that was crouching in like the walkway, right? Like off to the side a little bit.
Yeah. Apparently, you and I have the same thoughts on some things, but these 3 girls had taken a shortcut when they were walking home, and they came across a diminutive creature that had those, large red eyes and
Yeah.
I think 3 fingers and toes, and it was sickly looking. They made sure that people understand that this creature was sickly looking and looked like it was in distress and needed help. So they were scared of the creature, but they also felt bad for the creature at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you can keep talking, Nick. Sorry, I'm just gonna share a picture of the creature while you're talking about it.
So yeah, they were just scared coming across this creature. Now, some skeptics do say that this wasn't an alien, but was merely a homeless man in the area that triggered these girls' imaginations.
Yeah. You see the picture, Nick, on my screen?
Yeah.
Like the picture on the left, the drawing, that was done by the news. I think it was the news agency or the police that day or the next day after the creature was sighted. So I was like, look at that. Like you could confuse that with the homeless man.
Yeah, I don't really.
And then the other picture that you see all over the internet, this was done by an artist as well. So what's strange is it resembles the grays. Like when people describe the gray aliens, it resembles them, but it's not exactly like the grays.
Yeah, it looks like a gray alien, but not quite, and
the notes that I have, the girls were saying that the creature looked like it had oily skin, just like Carlos de Souza said.
yeah.
And they said that it looked scared. Like this creature, they got the feeling that it was scared, which you could imagine why.
Yeah.
And they originally told the press that it was a demon or a devil. I think it was a devil is what they were saying.
Yeah, they said they had seen the devil.
They originally didn't associate this creature with an alien. They thought this was a devil. And I guess when they got home, they went to one of the girls' parents' house. And when they were there, the parent was saying in an interview that the girls smelled like ammonia real strong. Even though they didn't touch the creature, I guess they were within about 8 or 10 feet of it, is from what I was reading from some of the interviews that were done. And the smell wouldn't come off them for days. They smelled like this really weird ammonia smell. The mom was saying that they went back to this footpath about an hour or 2 later after the girls calmed down, and they saw the strange 3-toed footprints in the sand.
Yeah.
So we have David in the chat. He's asking, did it make any type of noise? I don't think it did, right, Nick?
There's nothing on record of it making any type of noise. One of the reports I read claimed that one of those girls there got some kind of a telepathic message from the aliens stating it needed help and that it was afraid. But I don't know if that was in the official reports or not. I was reading different kinds of source material to prepare for the show.
Oh yeah. Well, the girls, they were kind of the first mainstream witnesses. I know now if you try to search and find the video of the girls talking, like the original interview, it's almost impossible to find. The only thing that comes up is James Fox's Varginha, uh, his Moment of Contact documentary that just came out, which is really good, by the way.
I'll have to check it out.
Also, the other video clip I can't find, one of the higher ups in the Brazilian military at Essa Air Force Base went on TV and he started saying that there's nothing to the story, nothing ever crashed. You ever seen that clip, Nick?
Yeah, I've seen that. There was a Brazilian video I was watching earlier in Portuguese where the guy was basically saying that nothing had happened and that the devil or the alien was a homeless guy. And then I think at the time they said one of the aliens was giving birth in the hospital or something, if I recall.
I'm not sure.
One of the reports was talking about how an alien or someone who had been impregnated by one of the creatures was giving birth in
One of those girls?
hospitals, and the government said that the baby wasn't an alien; it was just simply the child of a couple of midgets, of little people. And
Oh yeah, I've heard
it had some, like deformities or some crazy stuff.
Well,
the government.
I haven't I haven't written down. I wrote an official inquiry led by the Brazilian military concluded in 2010 that the young women had encountered a homeless, mentally unstable man named Mendiho. The commander of the 24th Police Battalion military presented photographs of a citizen known as Mendiho, who probably has some mental disability and whose physical characteristics match the description of the alien, so they say. They make it likely that the hypothesis is that this citizen, he was dirty due to heavy rains, was seen crouching by the wall and was mistaken by the three girls as a space creature. I was like, how insulting to them.
Yeah, that's insane. You've seen the sketches that people have made based on the descriptions that these girls have given, and it would it doesn't look like a human at all. To mistake a homeless person who's covered in dirt as an alien is quite a stretch.
And like you said, I guess we'll get into this in just a minute, but some of the witnesses saw these alien beings in the hospital, and like Nick was just saying, the Brazilian authorities also reported that the aliens seen in the hospital were actually an expecting couple of dwarves who were supposed to be having a child in the hospital. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, I don't know if one of the policemen that captured the creatures died a few days later. His name's Marco Eli Charez or Charez.
Chirizi.
He participated in the capture of one of the creatures, and he died days later of an infection. They said he was in his early 20s and healthy, so that's pretty weird. And then also at the same time, animals in a local zoo were dying when these creatures were around. And
there's a picture of Marco, Nick. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there's Marco.
Oh, okay, I've seen that picture.
Yeah, so that's him.
So yeah, he touches one of these alien creatures or captures them, and then he died of a weird infection just a couple days after the event. That's when
Yeah, well, I took some notes on that. So I guess the story goes, I got this from James Fox's documentary. I guess Marco was on a patrol with another guy his last name was Eric Lopez, I think is how you say it. And he was in a car and they were driving around looking for the creatures. And one of them took off running in front of the car. Marco jumps out of the car like a badass and he restrains it with his bare hands. Not even a net or nothing. No, not even a rope. He restrains it with his bare hands like a badass.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I guess he said that he had an oily, sticky substance on his skin and on his clothes. And he developed an infection that wouldn't go away. And his immune system was shutting down and he died about 2 weeks later, his sister said. Wow. And I guess the family was saying that I apparently the hospital wanted to bury him as quick as possible, like to get rid of the evidence, or because they were scared that he was going to get other people sick. So if that's true, which is hard to wrap your mind around, is this one of the first cases of a human dying from a bacteria or some kind of virus from another planet or another world?
That's definitely a possibility. I mean, if you look at all the different instances in history of people going to a foreign place and bringing disease, when the Europeans came and brought smallpox to the Native Americans and wiped them out. Other colonial powers went to places in India like the Sentinelese Islands, which is the home of the last uncontacted. Well, they've been contacted, but they're an isolated tribe. And back in the 19th century, some explorers went to the island and brought some disease, and it killed some of the people on the island. And that's why the people on that island don't want anyone coming to their homeland, because they're afraid they're going to get wiped out by disease. So an alien could definitely and probably brought some kind of microorganisms to this planet that killed this young man back in 1996.
Well, something weird too is I compare it to, I believe it was the Koyami UFO crash that Noe Torres did. We talked to him on our old radio show.
Yeah, I remember that.
A UFO had collided with a small passenger plane over Koyami, Mexico. And the Mexican authorities and the military showed up on the site. And I guess the United States was tracking this. And they saw that that they were going to send their own crew to check out what was going on. And when the American crew got there, allegedly all the Mexicans were dead. Like, they don't know what killed them, but they said that they think that it was some kind of a virus or something from that UFO.
Yeah,
but they didn't handle the bodies. It was just the UFO itself.
It emitted some kind of substance that killed
Nick,
people.
Do you think you'd be like Marco? Would you jump out with your bare hands and grab the alien?
No, no, I wouldn't. I'd run the opposite direction.
I read some interviews where they were saying that Marco and Eric Lopez actually brought that alien to 3 or 4 different hospitals before they found one that would actually take the alien.
Wow.
So that means this poor alien gets put in this car, captured by some strange man, driven around to all these hospitals, doesn't know where the hell it's at.
Yeah.
So continuing on, the next interesting part of the story, the fire department of Varginha allegedly captured one of the creatures near a wooded area. And the fire department individuals, once this was done, they kind of all went their separate ways. Some of them got shipped off to other towns. They don't go into a whole lot of details about what happened. Most of the stories we have about the firefighters are from like their families and things. So we don't exactly know how it happened. But shortly after you had this alien that was captured by Marco Chirizi, and you have this other one that was captured by the fire department, individuals started reporting that they were seeing big metal boxes being loaded onto military trucks behind a local hospital. I didn't write down the name of the hospital, which I can't believe I didn't, but I guess whatever hospital they had these aliens at, they said that there was Navy helicopters present in the area. Military officials were making the civilians leave the area. And they even said that the military was going around to local businesses in the hospital and taking the security camera footage.
Wow.
You ever heard of that one, Nick? Yeah, they said that they were taking the security tapes out of all the cameras and things.
Yeah, I read about it very briefly. I mean, it makes sense, again, if they're trying to cover up this incident, especially with the aid of the American government. They're going to destroy all the video. They're going to tie up all their loose ends. They wouldn't want some kind of documents floating around out there showing what may have occurred. They don't want any documentation about the incident that may show light as to the reality of this UFO crash.
Well, James Fox. Yeah, so James Fox, he was the one that did that documentary I keep referring to, Moment of Contact. he said that he's heard that there's a 35-second video clip of one of the creatures out there from the 90s. And I guess he doesn't have it in his possession, but he says that he knows multiple people that have seen this footage. And I guess he said he offered him $100,000 to buy the footage, and they wouldn't sell it to him.
Wow.
But I guess allegedly there's footage out there of the creature. So while we're talking about footage of the creatures, moving on. So there is an air traffic control individuals that were working at the local airport in Varginha that night. They were saying that on the radar tower, they were saying that the United States Air Force officials showed up unannounced without permission and met with Brazilian military officials. They said that allegedly the Brazilian military went and met up with Americans. They don't know if there was a package that was given to them. They don't know what they were talking about. But shortly after the Brazilians met up with the Americans, supposedly the Americans flew away and went back to America. So I don't know if that could have been the Americans that you were referring to. If they were there present, maybe they're leaving the country, or maybe they picked up some kind of a package of exotic material. Who knows?
Yeah, really. It's just shadow. There's a lot going on in the shadows that we don't know of, and this is one of them.
Oh yeah, and then the one witness, it was not the three girls that saw it in the walking path. It was one of their neighbors. They were saying that they saw what they think was a search and rescue mission from another UFO looking for it sounds totally insane, I know. But from what I watched on a documentary, they were saying they thought that there was some kind of a recovery effort by a separate UFO. They said it looked like it was flying around in like a grid pattern, slowly looking for the other aliens or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. If a craft goes down, I mean, just look at what we do. If an airplane crashes, we send search parties. So why wouldn't aliens do the same?
Well, this family reported that there was like a mom and dad and a kid. They were saying that they saw this object, looked like it was doing a search. And they said that shortly after, I guess this a couple days after, they said some American officials showed up at their house trying to bribe them to not talk about what they had seen. They said they offered them money, American money, and they said if they wouldn't talk about this, that they would give them this money, but they couldn't spend it in Brazil. They had to spend it out of the country for some reason. And the woman just said that they didn't take the bribe. But my first question I was going to ask you, do you think that's a hoax, or do you think that really happened?
It definitely sounds suspicious. I'm more leaning on, just hearing it off the cuff. I would say it's probably a hoax. I mean, if you're a person living in, be it Brazil, the Philippines, Ecuador, and someone comes and tells you, yeah, we'll give you what might be more than enough money for your family and your children and grandchildren to live off of for quite some time, I don't think they're going to say no to that. Human nature would be inclined to take that money and just shut up and go on with life. That's what I think would happen.
Yeah. I don't know. And I was thinking, they said the woman didn't take the bribe. I was like, for all they know, if they're Americans in Brazil, they don't have authority there. So I was like, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
Well, here's my other thing. While we're talking about things that might or might not be hoaxes or not, from what you read, did you see some of these reports make this sound awfully similar to Roswell?
Yeah, I saw some parallels in the cover-up efforts of this incident in Roswell. Again, like I said, the United States government was probably working jointly with the Brazilian government, and they would have given them the playbook to carry out a cover-up. So, you see very similar tropes and themes in the cover-up for this incident, Roswell, and other incidents, as I said earlier in the show.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then my last point that I wanted to make. This is kind of out of order. So we talked about Marco Chirizi, the guy who touched the alien and he died. There was a guy with him named Eric Lopez, and he was. I know that Marco was an officer. I don't know what Eric's rank was, but supposedly he still lives in Virginia too, and he's the only person living from that second capture of the alien. And he kind of went into hiding. He lives
Yeah,
like a recluse.
yeah.
He lives like a recluse, and he hasn't talked about the incident since it happened. This guy is clearly afraid of what happened. I know on Moment of Contact, the camera crew went up to his house and went to talk to him. He started saying he was going to shoot him if they didn't leave.
Wow.
And he was saying that he wasn't going to talk about it, and he was talking in third person. It was weird. Like the way he was talking, he's like, no, Jeremy doesn't want an ice cream. Jeremy wants this. And finally they go, well, where's Jeremy? And the guy, and it'd be like, well, that's me. That's basically what he said. They were like, well, where's Eric? And the guy goes, that's me. And he was going like this, waving his finger, and he had his hand on his waist like he had a gun, and he was waving his hand saying he's going to shoot him. He probably would have down there. I was like, I wouldn't do
down
that.
there,
Yeah. So the Virginia UFO case, I don't think we're ever going to figure it out, really. I mean, James Fox had a phenomenal version with his documentary. I think before him, you had Roger Lear and Stanton Friedman were actually both down there, which is kind of crazy, picturing Stanton Friedman wandering around down there.
yeah.
But I guess he did, apparently. But believe it or not, this has a lot of evidence to support it. We only talked about a handful of the witnesses. There's probably about 20 or 30 good witnesses that are out there on the internet and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a lot of information about this case, and I'm inclined to think that it did happen. I think there were alien bodies that came out of the craft. I believe that some of them survived. They got scared. They fled into the nearby wilderness, and then when they got desperate, when these aliens get desperate, they came out of hiding to try to get help and communicate that fact in the best way they could, and whatever means that would have been. But it's a crazy story. It's maybe the most extreme or craziest sounding story of any UFO crash that you can hear. I mean, when we did Ely, we got testimony that bodies they were all dead bodies that were taken out and transported away from the scene. But
yeah,
I can't think of any other incidences besides Varginha where where beings were alive from the crash and managed to at least walk around for a little bit before finally being captured.
It's just crazy to think about that there was literally at least 2, possibly 3 aliens running around this neighborhood in Brazil in 1996. That's not even really that long ago in the grand scheme of things. Almost all of these witnesses are still alive. It's not like the Ely case we did where we captured the testimony of, I don't know what, maybe 20 or 30 guys, but there was probably another 20 or 30 that we had to talk to just their family members because they weren't around anymore.
Yeah, because the crash happened so long ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. Real quick, so I know we're going to have to get back onto this topic again at some point. I know Tim's really wanted to do this one with us, and of course he's coming back from an international trip right now. Real quick, did you want to go over our next week's show, Nick, and then we'll talk go over a little bit of our team news in the last couple minutes of the show for those of our listeners that weren't watching at the very beginning?
So today we talked about the Varginha UFO incident, primarily the story about 3 little girls who had seen an alien staggering around in an alleyway and the ensuing attempt by the government to cover it up. Next week, we're going to get into something that we've talked about a lot, but we always come back to it. We're going to talk about the Patterson film. The Patterson film, we're going to get into the ins and the outs of it, whether it's fake or it's real, and we'll
The Patterson Bigfoot film you forgot to mention, Nick.
Patterson Bigfoot film, Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film. It's something that's been talked about for decades, but because it's been talked about for decades because it's such a great piece of evidence for the existence of Sasquatch.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
then, you want to go over our archives, Nick, and a little bit of that kind of stuff while I write something on our social media real quick?
So yeah, Jeremy's been uploading the old radio show we did on Blog Talk Radio onto YouTube onto a separate channel, and that show was phenomenal. We talked to people like Stanton Friedman, Jeff Wamsley, Frank Ficino. We talked to giants in the paranormal world. I mean, we had Stanton Friedman on 3 times. So there's a lot of good material in those old episodes, and anybody who's watching this show and enjoys it ought to check the old ones out, because I go back even from time to time just to listen to those shows because of what the guests had to say. Their knowledge was first rate and couldn't be beaten. It can't be beaten.
And then one other thing I wanted to mention too was our old archives. I wouldn't say we lost the rights to the audio, but we kind of were having a battle with our old provider, and we barely got that back. Barely got those rights back recently. So we're trying to convert them all onto YouTube. I'm more than halfway done right now. I'd say I'll probably give it another week or two. I should have everything up. One more thing I'd like to mention. Like Nick was saying, we're going to talk about the Patterson Gimlin footage next weekend. It should be up on our website either tomorrow or the next day. We'll have the official card and everything up there for everybody. And me and Nick should be getting an update here on our Pinedale, Arizona UFO crash that we're looking into. All right, everyone, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I would like you guys to do us a favor. If you want to support the show, click like, subscribe, share this video or any other videos of ours on your social media. Like I said, like, subscribe, and it'll help support the show. The show, as far as we're concerned, we're never going to charge for this. It's always going to be free. But we do need your help spreading the word of the show. The show at this point, the show is only about 2 months old or so. So we're still kind of building an audience at this point. But at the moment, we're slowly growing, I guess you would say. Any last thing you want to say, Nick, before we end the show?
I would just like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And I'm looking forward to discussing the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film next week with the guys. And it's something you're not going to want to miss, everyone. Everybody have a good night.
Have a good night.